something, I don't know. So what we were going to do is start with an introduction as to what we're doing here. So welcome everyone to our very first, as I'm pretty sure you can tell, Hangout, our development and kind of API-related community Hangout regarding Bitfinex. So what we want to accomplish today is to basically reach out to the community at large and discuss with them and give them an open forum to discuss with us how they use our API, as well as how we can make the API better for them, and any suggestions or feature requests, etc. We also plan on going over some of the stuff we've recently done, such as adding the WebSocket API. We also want to discuss the direction our version 2 REST API is going to take, kind of specifically perhaps regarding Swagger, which I think is a pretty good kind of standard for how to make an API that makes sense, as well as providing client libraries. So welcome everybody to those who are watching and have not joined, as well as to the people who are here in the chat, which is Paolo Arduino, our basically he's in charge of the backend systems at Bitfinex. Enrico is another one of our developers. BTC Vix is in the chat room with us as well, and Yago is also here. So let's get started. Second. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is kind of go over the stuff that we have recently accomplished, which our biggest recent release was the WebSocket API that Paolo basically designed. So it's been working really well, and I really like it a lot. It provides a really cool feature in that in the past there's always been an issue with how do I make sure that the book I have can kind of sync up with the stream of changes to the book, and we kind of avoided that by just allowing you to, on the first message, receive a snapshot of the book, and then we kind of know what you know, and we can update it as things change. So I thought that was a kind of a neat way to kind of make it a lot easier, I hope, for developers to be able to kind of mirror our book in their own instance, so that they can kind of keep track of, you know, what the what's going on with the book, and, you know, be able to look at all of the depth as much as they need. And we also have a more granular book, which is the actual raw book, which is not aggregated by price levels. The price level aggregated one is much simpler for basic things, but if you really need the granularity, then the raw feed is also available now. And a big part of what we wanted to accomplish with WebSocket API was simplify the process of connecting to the API and receiving updates for different things that are going on, as well as just to overall decrease the load of both people who have to send a ton of polling requests over HTTP, as well as the servers who have to respond to those, especially when it's all the same information. It makes the streaming model just makes so much more sense, as I'm sure that you guys all would probably agree. So let me see. Has anyone just wanted to kind of double check to see if we have any questions coming in so far? Doesn't appear so. So we'll continue.
Can I ask a higher level question?
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
And you have to bear with me. I'm definitely not on the dev side, so this is why it's coming from a more general standpoint.
That's perfect.
And so, like, roughly a year ago, there was the I think it's the attempted alpha point integration. Now, you know, years passed, and you guys are developing a lot of new things. Can you just kind of tell me what the alpha point integration was, the problem it was trying to solve, and then why it wasn't kind of the right solution, if that makes sense? I think some people don't even know, you know, they heard about alpha point being integrated and then they stopped hearing about it. Some of us don't even know where it is, or if is it still part of Bitfinex?
I can go over that and kind of discuss and explain what happened there. So specifically how things would work typically is you would have an incoming order that's sent to a matching engine, right? Now, for an exchange that has like a central limit order book, that's relatively simple. You're just going to put it on the book, and when people trade, then you're done. You now have a different balance of 1 Bitcoin, and he now has a balance of X dollars, and that's relatively simple. Now, yeah, we're not going to focus too much on this because it's mainly about API, but this is interesting because many people were looking at this for how it was going to relate to our WebSocket API. So what happened was, with the margin system, you basically have a open position, and that means that the job isn't done once your trade is executed. You have to maintain that position and monitor it. So what that means is you're doing a lot of read and writes to the database as the P&L changes, etc. And as it turned out, our matching engine wasn't really the bottleneck, and that's what AlphaPoint was going to provide for us, was a new matching engine. But it turns out that almost all the load was happening on the parts after the matching engine, with reporting stuff to the database and the settlement processes. So it just didn't make any sense to, and we actually had a working system with them. We even turned on WebSocket feeds at that point, but it just didn't make much sense because the users wouldn't really notice much of a difference because the actual thing that was slowing them down was kind of further on down the line. And that's why we decided to kind of switch gears and start focusing on the backend system. And that's really what Paolo kind of just spearheaded. And that's why a lot of those backend changes resulted in, he actually has an open source project called Pigado that we started using. And we're having a second version, which is going to be called Grenache. These are all Italian wines. So Paolo's are Italian, and it's a cool naming convention. So anyways, that's the kind of the story with AlphaPoint. Was the product was good. It did everything that we wanted it to do, and in fact, they had kind of even added in new features specifically to kind of help us with these things. But at the end of the day, it turned out that the hotspot was not really in the matching engine, and we were more than capable of keeping up with the number of orders that we were receiving. The issue was actually on the back-end settlement process, and then we decided to just switch over our focus to there. So I hope that answers kind of like the general question of whatever happened to AlphaPoint. Specifically, let's get back on track to discussing the API. So we were kind of discussing WebSockets. Does anyone have anything to add as far as the WebSockets are concerned? The WebSocket API that we just recently re-released. That's one that Paolo released, and we like it because it's very lightweight, and we tried to keep it as lightweight as possible. So instead of using text fields for a lot of areas, it uses numbers when possible, and it's just a simple array in JSON, so it's pretty easy to parse. Some of the client libraries is where we wanted to add the functionality of how one would kind of translate this array into like something more human readable. Instead of having to do like the third field in the array, you could actually then create a class or something like that and feed it into it, so that you just be like, okay, I can reference it by price, which makes more sense to from the development side. But I think unless there's anyone who wants to go into any more detail, maybe Paolo has something something to add about the WebSocket API, kind of your design process behind the scenes.
The overall idea is to offer a really tiny protocol. So I understand from some one of you that it's not at the first look it's not so easy to use it because you have to build the book on your own. But it's the best way for us from our side to send you the information, all the information you need to build your book. And also with this implementation we can save a lot of bandwidth and offer you a better, a lower latency. That is really important since we are going to into the path to add the WebSocket input APIs. So that means that you will be able to send orders through the WebSockets. That is, and so we will maintain this really clean and compressed protocol, and so I just wanted to clarify the reason why we are adopting that kind of protocol instead of, for example, I saw that some of our competitors send the full book or the changes, but in a more readable way. But for us, it's not good enough. Just say that.
Yeah, what we wanted to do is make it as low latency and as fast as possible so that you can use less resources on your systems to be able to parse things. So it's, even though it's harder for a human to read, it's much easier for a computer to read just a number rather than having to parse a string. So that's kind of the design, kind of philosophy that went into the arrays with a bunch of numbers in them. So, and as I said, I think that in our client libraries, one of the things that we were thinking of doing was having helper classes such as, order, which means that when the API uses very little bandwidth to transmit this, array of numbers, then the client library can translate that for you into something more human readable, which would mean that you still get the benefits of the decreased latency and kind of move the parsing functionality over to the client side where we think it kind of belongs, as opposed to we should just keep pure data on the wire. So that is another thing that Paolo touched on real quickly, which was that we are soon going to be having the input API for the WebSockets. This is going to be, I think, really, really useful, because mainly it'll mean that you no longer need to kind of mix the REST API with the WebSocket API, and you can just program in one kind of environment and just do that. I mean, right now it's been working pretty well that you can kind of send an order via REST and then kind of see the notification of, hey, a new order just got placed for you over the authenticated channel on the WebSockets. But it's going to be a lot easier and probably lower latency to be able to just use the WebSocket connection you already have, and it should hopefully really cut down on a lot of the HTTP is just a pretty verbose, protocol compared to WebSockets, especially with the already having the connection set up, and you don't need to do the ACKs back and forth. I mean, you can kind of solve that with keep alives, etc. But it's just a much cleaner and neater way to do things, and I really think that the input API is going to make everyone's lives a lot easier. So I believe that we've covered pretty much all of the current WebSocket APIs with a little kind of preview of what we're working on for the future. But I wanted to kind of look at something that is kind of near and dear to my heart, which is the community project section. And this is something that Paolo really also was excited about, that he really wanted to kind of push, was we want to reach out to the community and say, if you've built something cool, some kind of thing that uses our API, we want to give you a platform to show it off, to maybe be able to interact with other people who are working on similar projects and kind of combine your resources, kind of a go-to spot where people, if they're looking for something that might be, maybe they have a question of like, hey, I'm trying to build a bot to manage my positions. Maybe someone else has already done something and I can avoid repeating their effort. Maybe I can add to that project and kind of make it better. So we want to basically have on the docs page a new section that's going to be entitled Community Projects, where if you have a project that basically uses the Bitfinex API in any pretty standard way, or I mean, it doesn't even have to be a standard way necessarily, if it's somewhat of an interesting way at the very least, I can actually show you, I believe, give me 2 seconds, one of the examples of something that I was working on that I just kind of did for fun. Let me see real quick. I can pull this up. Okay. There we go. Okay, let me try to share my screen again now, but entire screen, I guess. For some reason, it only finds 1 or 2 of these things. So if you see your screen now, you should be looking at my Bitfinex Quotron project, which is basically just a terminal version of the book. So it'll showcase the book, it'll show you the current ticker, it'll show you the trades. It's something very basic and something very I mean, it's kind of even in some ways kind of anachronistic or kind of nostalgic for like a lot of people who are involved in trading might remember having these like old, kind of command line looking interfaces. And I just thought it'd be cool to try to kind of build something like that in the terminal. And I mean, it's more of like a project for fun, just because I thought it was something kind of cool or nerdy to do. So that's why I basically built it for no other reason than that. But I don't know. I liked it. I thought it was interesting. So this is the kind of project where if this actually will be one of the first ones that we throw up there, just because it's something that I was working on just for fun. But I'm hoping that maybe someone else says, "Oh wow, that's really cool. I would love to kind of add something to it. Like maybe I can clean up some of the interfaces, or maybe I could make it so that you can actually place orders from the command line." And I mean, depending on how much of a command line aficionado you are, it might be kind of cool to have to avoid switching over to a browser to place trades when you can just do it from the command line as well, using something with like kind of what's kind of like a TUI text user interface versus a graphical user interface. Sorry, were you guys not able to see that? Can you see my screen right now?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, good. Cool, perfect. So yeah, this is basically the kind of Quotron, homage thing here. So that was just kind of one example of a type of project that we would be looking at. That was using actually our client libraries. We also built 3 libraries.
I just listened in the chat.
Yeah, I was looking in the chat right now. We have 3 open source libraries already: Ruby, Go from the Google Golang, and Node.js. Me and Paolo are kind of huge Node.js fans, and we just think the performance is so good and it's so ubiquitous that I really, really like it. So that's really what I've focused on with the Node one. I think Paolo wrote the other 2, Go, and the Ruby one, I think Enrico really kind of did a lot on that one, I believe. Is that correct, Enrico?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, and obviously, the whole point of making these open source is that if there's anything that people can do to improve them and make them work better, then hopefully they'll. And a lot of people have already done this. On the Node.js one, a guy made an amazing pull request that turned all of the different message types into different events. So now you can just do on ticker, I can have a specific set of actions run whenever I receive a ticker. And that's, to me, just made the whole library work so much better. And it's things like that that I really want to encourage, and I want to try to incentivize and show people, try to get more community involvement like that, because I think it just made the whole library a lot better and probably saved a lot of developers a lot of hassles. So
It was me.
It was Yago, yes, exactly. He made probably, in my opinion, the best pull request I've seen so far, and it really made that library. It made it so much more useful, in my opinion. So thank you so much, Yago. It was when me and Paolo were looking over that code, we were like, wow, this guy really knows his JavaScript, and it was even written very, very cleanly as well, beyond just the functionality that was super useful. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. I was working with your platform. I need using the API and decided to code it.
Yeah, well, this is exactly the kind of things we want. In fact, our documentation is also open source. So if there's something in the docs that you say, this is just such a confusing way to try to explain that, why don't you just explain it like this? This is how I finally got it, Like, some people are still maybe confused by certain things, and there are some confusing things about our API, mainly because Bitfinex has been around for so long and has gone through so many different permutations of ways that we can try to service the exchange kind of arena. So you'll see these old legacy fields in our REST API, like what exchange do you want to send this order to? And it's like, I'm using Bitfinex's API. What other exchange? Obviously, I want to send it to Bitfinex. But there was a time, a long time ago, where you could route orders to Mt. Gox via Bitfinex. After that, there was a time when you could route orders to Bitstamp via Bitfinex. And all of those things are kind of still in the code, and that's partially why it's important to, A, just be accurate in describing how the API actually works, not how I wish it worked at some points, which is why it's like, no, I don't want to remove that field from the documentation because it's still a field that's part of the API, and therefore I'm just trying to describe the API as accurately as possible. I'm not trying to write the documentation for the API as I wish it were. So, but those are some of the things that actually I wanted to go over next, which was we are looking into, I believe that's next, right? Let me just take a double check here. Yeah, community projects. We just finished that, and I want to, again, just as a kind of closing remark for the community project section, I want to invite anyone who has any interesting projects to please either email me or submit them via in the GitHub that we have for the docs. And I really want to get anyone who's building anything cool, I want to get you a platform to show it off. So please, we can discuss further about how we can get that. But so the next thing we wanted to go over was the REST API v2. And as I was kind of pointing out a couple seconds ago, the current REST API, it was the result of a lot of different things that we've tried and a lot of things that we've done that made sense during certain times. But I want to kind of take the opportunity of the version 2 API to kind of clean up anything that doesn't make any sense anymore. Kind of, what's the word? Just have a fresh start and get rid of any kind of legacy stuff that we don't really use anymore, and kind of also try to have a more overarching design philosophy. And that kind of brings me to Swagger, because Swagger is basically like a... how many of you guys are familiar with Swagger at all? Anybody?
I'm a bit familiar with it.
Cool. I'm not sure if there's not that many other people here. So Swagger, basically, as a quick description to anyone listening, is a kind of like a specification for an API or a standard for an API. So an API should operate in a certain way, and it basically is it's now actually been changed from Swagger to the Open API Initiative, and the goal is that I can specify how my API works, what are the different kind of models that you can access, and then in a RESTful way, typically, you'll get in order to receive information about it, you'll post in order to create a new one, you'll update if you want to change something, and one of the goals of the Open API Initiative is that ideally a machine could completely integrate your API without you having to code anything, because it knows, it can say, what kind of things do you have? And it'll say, I have orders, I have trades, I have a book, I have a ticker, and it'll say, okay, well now I've already learned how to get those things from you. So I could update my order if I wanted to. I could post a new order. I could get the status of an order. And I can do all of that without the developer having to do any of the kind of integration work. What that also means is that it would provide us the ability to offer a lot more user libraries, client libraries, because they can auto-generate a client library in like 20 plus languages based on the fact that you've specified how the API works, kind of like with a design document, so the Swagger spec. And from that, I know that, okay, well, how would I... I'll take a look at raml.org. So specifically, it's kind of like it's a way that you could say that since I know that you're going to be doing these REST calls, and I know the endpoints, here's a client library that interacts with the thing that you designed. It also can generate the server-side code as well for some of that stuff, although there's some ways that you have to kind of figure out how you want to do your authentication scheme. That's actually one of the other things I wanted to update in the new V2 REST API. because the current REST API, it just has a couple things that are not exactly standard and are somewhat, in some instances, can be somewhat difficult to work with. Like, for example, we use SHA-384, which is, in some implementations, the one that people just say, I'm not going to bother with that one. I'll just do 256 and 512, because those are the standard ones. So I don't really know all the design decisions that went into picking SHA-384, but we did, and so now, so it's kind of like one of those things where it's kind of, well, we would rather probably switch to something a little more standard for the V2. The second thing is that I believe right now when you're sending an authenticated request, you have to include the hash as a header key, but then also include it in the body, which doesn't really, there's no real reason to include it twice. And I think some people have brought up to me that they were confused by that. So these are kind of some of the type of things that we're going to be taking a look at to try to make easier to use for people. And yeah, we're definitely going to add raml.org into the discussion because I haven't heard of it yet, but I'm definitely eager for any kind of other suggestions on how to make it the most logical and intuitive API that it can be. So some of the other things that we want to do on the V2 API is the ability to update orders in an atomic way, so that, as opposed to the current cancel replace, which can sometimes not work ideally. We would actually have like a true native update feature for the order. So if you just want to move your price, you don't have to cancel the order, then put a new order in. You could just update the price on that order, something like that. As well as the ability to kind of interact more intuitively with all of the different endpoints. So,
Josh, can I say something
yes,
about
please,
this?
Paolo, take over.
One of the most interesting things of API v2 and WebSocket input APIs are that, as you probably know, the REST v1 are basically working directly with our post-trading engine that relies on the database. So instead, the REST v2 and the WebSocket input APIs, as well as WebSockets, are basically handled by another process that is real-time and is close to the matching engine. And it's so also REST v2 will offer REST data, but in a more fresh data, and they will be really faster. So expect a lower latency and a huge set of new options and functionalities. Also, in this process, we wish to plan the algorithmic order types that are really important. So we are mainly looking to the TWAP in this moment and the iceberg orders. And at the beginning, we will implement those only via WebSocket input APIs, but we will probably let you handle those kind of orders also via REST v2. There will be no support for REST v1 for those new orders.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting, and I think that ideally what we're going to try to do, and Paolo can maybe speak more to this, is it can be somewhat annoying from the developer's perspective when it's like, oh, I'm sending the order via REST. Okay, that means I have to structure it this way, right? Oh, but now I'm going to send it via WebSocket, or I receive an order via WebSocket, but it's coming in a completely different kind of schema. So I think that what we're going to hope to do is try to make it more, more uniform in the inputs from both sides. So REST v2 and input WebSocket API should ideally, hopefully, receive the same kind of that's actually a really interesting question. I'm going to get to that one in just a moment. So yeah, because there's some other things I wanted to go over with the API kind of related to that. if anyone didn't see, there's a new question asked, which is I would really like to see webhooks for things like new order, execute an order, new position, etc. And that's a really interesting thing that we can discuss in just a moment. But where was I? Yes. So ideally, instead of having to kind of have two different schemas, one for REST orders and one for WebSocket orders, ideally you'd be able to just have one kind of model for an order, and you could submit it via REST v2 if you wanted to, or you could submit it via WebSocket on the input side once that's released. And I think that'll kind of make the experience of integrating the two a lot smoother, because you'll have kind of an overarching identity for the things that you are sending, no matter what the channel that you send them via. And I think that'll kind of make it a lot cleaner. So that's one thing that I was kind of looking into doing, or wanted to see probably happen in the future. So actually, real quick, I'm going to pause for 1 second and ask BTC Vix, what do you think about algorithmic order types that we would be implementing? Do you have any input on what type of algorithm? I think he has to take off now, so no problem. So let's keep moving along then. This question, I don't know what the question is, but let me just take a look at this real quick.
Okay, let me answer to the two questions regarding the first one is the webhooks. That is a really nice idea, and we may prepare that. So to be honest with you, we have a couple of other priorities, but I'd like to have that implemented. So yeah, it's a really nice addition. So thank you very much for suggesting it. And also regarding the new APIs, we will focus at first on the WebSocket input APIs before the REST v2. And we are aiming to add the WebSocket input APIs in 1 month, roughly. So in terms of weeks, let's say from 4 to 6 weeks, and really don't expect 3 months. We will do that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Paolo, for that. So yeah, to give you, to kind of sum up, the WebSocket input side is going to be the first priority. Then after that, we'll tackle REST v2. So one other thing I wanted to bring up in kind of relation to the question about webhooks was that some people have also requested the ability to have a user-defined field for an order, so that if I put a new order in, I can have kind of a client ID on that order, which means that I can then track it more easily, perhaps on the WebSocket stream. As I see it come in, I can match it up to the ID that I've already placed, and I think that some other people have implemented that. What are your thoughts on that, Paolo? And do you think that also might be a way to provide some of the functionality of like a webhook?
Sorry, I lost you for a second. Can you rephrase it?
Specifically, some people have requested in the past a user-definable client ID field in the order, so that
that's for sure. That we will add that because for different reasons. First of all, the WebSocket input APIs will need that, so the user can track from their side the order that has been sent, because in the WebSocket input APIs, everything is asynchronous, so you need a way to track and define patterns to find the data you are sending to our system and receive back. So it's really important. So that is one of the first additions we are going to make, and that is also important for the algorithmic order type. So yeah, definitely.
That's what I was thinking too. Is that while webhooks is not the top of the priority list, even though I think it is something that we all really want to do, as a sort of short-term measure, it might be possible for you to use the WebSocket API and the new input order field so that you could, the client ID field, and then you could basically track the order like that. I know it's not exactly the same as a webhook, and you might have a system that requires that you use webhooks so that it can kind of post something to your side, etc. So that hopefully is coming as well to kind of wrap up that.
Regarding the last question, we are not making any change to the WebSocket format or APIs format. We are growing our internal structure, so it's maintenance and basically upgrade.
On the hardware side, a lot of it's hardware upgrades, and so it's nothing as far as a programming change that you would need to kind of adjust what kind of messages you're going to be receiving. You'll be receiving the same messages. I believe, Paolo, you implemented a type of what's the word now? You have some sort of mechanism by which you're going to send via the WebSocket stream. Maintenance is starting or something like that.
Yeah, that is mainly used for, in this moment, for notifying that we are resyncing the trading engine, and we are going to add more events to that type of message. But tomorrow we will shut down the platform just to make few hardware upgrades and improvement to the structure. We are working closely with our data center to make sure that everything can grow indefinitely and work better in the future.
Yeah, especially with our new Ethereum pairs, we've seen a little uptick in volume, and we just want to make sure we stay ahead of the curve as far as the resource requirements for the amount of volume that we have. I mean, I think that there was a time in the past where, obviously we had some issues going back and forth, but I think that we've really stabilized the system to the point where it's been really reliable lately, and that's kind of what we want to make sure that we make sure to keep doing that. So we always have been doing things in a very careful way. Sometimes that's what causes some of the delays, is that we sometimes just decide to test something for another week before we want to release it live to the public. But I think that it's really shown benefits in that we've had very little downtime over the past couple months. So I think that it's better to be safe than sorry, especially in areas like this. Stuff like social networks, I mean, you can kind of roll out a change and it doesn't really affect anything, but with kind of financial instruments, it's super important to always make sure to do things in as safe a way as possible. And so basically security and kind of like stability are core concerns, even if that sometimes leads to slower rollout of cool features, because we all love the cool features, and that's kind of what really, like, when we're developing stuff, we really kind of are like, man, this is going to be so cool, but we have to kind of temper that against the safety concerns and security, and those always are the number one things that we are considering when we're deciding to roll something out. So I hope that answers the question from Jesse Poikias regarding the infrastructure upgrades tomorrow. So let's see real quick. So we've gotten some pretty good questions so far in regards to what features people would like to see. That's actually something that I actually really am curious about, and I would love to see if people have other things that they want to see. This is exactly why we're doing this Hangout, is so that people can have an opportunity to say, well, I'd really like webhooks. And if someone, for example, says something like, that's cool that you're going to do TWAP, but I really want a VWAP. Okay, well, this is the forum. This is the time when you can tell us what's important to you and what you'd like to see happen. So, if anyone has any questions or let's start with feature requests. Does anyone have any feature requests or anything that they'd like to see on the platform? anything that they want to see added that we currently don't offer.
Well, I have a suggestion. For
Okay.
example, I have a bot working with your platform, but the matter is, I want other users use it, but I can't because there is no third-party platform, something like Auth or like that.
That is
So
a really, really good suggestion because I've actually been thinking about that a lot lately. Please continue if you have anything to add to that suggestion, or are you basically just saying you want to create some sort of OAuth system?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Well, I know maybe we are talking about money, about Bitcoin, but it's really secure, must be really secure. So it might be a matter of that, but I think it could be really cool implementing it.
I totally agree with you, to be honest, because we're looking into any possible partnerships that can add some features or functionality to the WebSocket. We were exploring a debit card option in the past. That provider kind of didn't work, but we're still actively looking into that, and we have hopefully something cool coming in the future in regards to a debit card product that people can use to spend Bitcoins. And I think that as we've been going through integrations with a bunch of different third parties, I think that it's kind of been shown more and more that some sort of OAuth system would be very useful. And Paolo, what are your thoughts on an OAuth system?
I think that is a really good suggestion, and we have already marked that in our internal system to track down the feature request because I think that's really cool to have. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm actually impressed by the Coinbase OAuth system, and I think that I would like to kind of have something similar so that we can kind of, because I think that what Yago was really getting at there was that you can do some really cool things by integrating with our API, and you get access to this really deep order books and a lot of really interesting data as well. But it really doesn't work unless I can actually have users, and I can't really link to a user's account really. But I do want to go into some other features that sort of might help in some ways. We actually have implemented recently the ability to create granular permissions on API keys. And it's been really cool because it potentially would allow, like let's say for example that I have an accountant that's doing my taxes because they're due in 2 days or whatever, right? And I want to give them access to be able to look at the data. I don't want them to be able to place any orders for me. I definitely don't want them to allow to do any withdrawals for me, but I want them to be able to see my trade history and stuff like that. It would be potentially possible to create an API key for that user and only give him read permissions on certain areas of the site. And that is a potential way that in the interim, we kind of were looking at ways in which you could share your account or authorize other people to do things with your account, but limit that to what you're comfortable with. And then, of course, you would always have the ability to revoke that key in the future. One of our upcoming features, which a lot of users had requested, is the ability to change the permissions on a key. So, for example, some people, and maybe some of the developers who have bots might be able to relate to this, is like, this is literally what one user had told me. Is like, so I have my bot. It's running on your, it's running and placing orders on your platform, but I don't want to have to SSH into the machine, stop it. Then I don't want to have to be able to do withdrawals by moving a different key over there because I don't want to leave a withdrawal key on the machine all the time. It would be nice if I could go to the website, update that, okay, for right now, I'm giving it permission. I'm updating this key so it has permission to do withdrawals. Then I can have the bot withdraw to my cold storage or whatever. And then I can just remove that permission again. And now I'm back to the situation where the bot can't withdraw. And that's something that we're actually releasing, I believe, next Monday or the Monday after that. So it's currently in testing right now. But that was a feature request that we are going to be releasing soon, the ability to update your keys permissions. So I think that'll be really, really useful as well if you want to offer short-term. You could offer someone a key for a short amount of time for only certain things. This is also something that we are hoping to expand into the idea of sub-accounts where you might be a manager in more of a professional setting and you might have traders trading under you. You want to give all of them the ability to trade on a certain account, but you don't want to give them the ability to withdraw, etc. So I think that to get back to the original point, OAuth is going to be really cool, and it's something that we have on the feature request list that we all really are excited to do something with. But in the meantime, I would suggest that this is a kind of potential stopgap measure, or it also will have other implications that are going to be pretty cool as well, I think. So.
Okay, we have a couple of questions. So the first one is that, yeah, we in the past, even when we changed something in the WebSockets, we didn't update the version. So that will change starting from the next update that will come probably next week. So we will pass to 1.1. There will not be anything much different. Just we are going to send. Right now, we are sending in the you know that when you subscribe the private channel, you will receive the last 30 orders and the last 30 trades. So we are making sure that you will receive in the order snapshot, in the closed order snapshot and in the trade snapshot, you will receive 30 entries for each pair. So let's say the last 30 trades on ATH USD, the last 30 trades on BTC USD, and so on. So it's just a matter of length of the snapshot that you will receive. But we will update the version, and we will update the version number, we will update, and we will update the documentation as well, just to reflect that in the changelog. Okay, then other question. I think that the user refers to, SJ refers to the fact that he would be able to, instead of specifying the amount in BTC, for example, if we want to say the amount in USD, the equivalent amount in USD, is something that we are going to add in the UI first, and then if that is an interesting feature, we can add also on the API side.
Yeah, I think that I remember a couple other people want. In fact, I for one really would like that feature because it's nice to just be able to say I want $500 worth of Bitcoin right now because I need to give someone $500 and they're willing to accept it. And that's typically the way that most things work nowadays. It's very rare. There's a couple exceptions, but it's rare where you'll see someone who prices something in BTC. I, for example, use a service called Pico a lot to recharge my phone. So it's interesting because typically it'll always change between like 0.0236 or 0.0235, but it's always having to enter in this number when instead I'd rather just be able to put in a dollar amount. So yeah, I think that's definitely something that had been brought up in the past.
Yeah, and we are looking forward to add that and marked in the feature request. Thank you for pointing it out. Yes. Last question we have, what does land mean when I'm subscribing to the channel? Okay, that means that when you subscribe to an order book channel, the default length is 25. That means that you will receive the top 25 for the bid side orders aggregate price point for the bid side, and the top 25 aggregated entries for the ask side. You can, when you subscribe to the order book channel, you can specify the length. Also, so you can specify, for example, 100. We have a few lengths that you can specify. So the default is 25, but you can specify also 100. We are looking towards opening more than length that is so. But right now we are limiting that. I'm looking at. Let's see, because we have for sure a couple of other length that we support, and let me pick the let's see. Okay, this is the link to the. Let's see. Can you see the? Everyone can see the group chat also, who is only listening.
Let me see. Did you put it in the chat? Are you saying? Yeah, I see it right there. Yep.
So basically now we support only 25 and 100, but we are working to allow also 500 price points per site.
Yes. That is something we've been discussing a lot actually internally, where we want to eventually even be able to offer the full book, but it's a matter of balancing the resource requirements to do so with the actual usefulness and necessity of doing so, I guess.
And
because
also
there might be a million orders that are at 0.01, because most people use that as a test value, like I want to buy 0.01 Bitcoin for 1 penny, something like that. So a lot of the test orders will kind of come on that end of the spectrum, and it's mostly a lot of garbage at the $1 million mark and at the 1 penny mark.
Yeah, and also there is a new addition that we added a few time ago, that is basically the opportunity to specify the frequency of updates. That is really important because let's say that you don't have such amazing connection, you may want to receive updates every 5 seconds, so you can specify the frequency. And so you have basically 3 parameters that are precision, frequency, and length, that are so you can basically decide what you want to see and how much frequency you want to receive that. And that's you have to know that WebSockets are also used by our new mobile application. So everything that you are using, all the APIs are basically the same APIs that we are using for the mobile application, and so you can build pretty much everything we can with our API. So that's our aim. I mean, we want to give you the opportunity to create anything that we can, the same things that we can build, you should be able to build using our APIs.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the fundamental philosophies that I really kind of want to see happen, and it's kind of like the principle by which I look at the API is that anything that the website can do, you should be able to do, and you should be able to recreate your entire own version of Bitfinex using only the API, and ideally, we would only be using the API as well, so that way there's nothing that we are doing on the website from an interface perspective that any other user couldn't do. And if you want your own version of Bitfinex where it has a purple theme, you could build that for yourself, and there would be no issues with that because the same endpoints are going to be available however someone chooses to access those. So I think that's a really good point from Paolo, is that our mobile app on iOS and on Android is only using the WebSocket API right now, I believe. Or I think where it's receiving data, it's using the WebSocket API. When it's sending orders, it's using the REST API because that's currently the only way to send them, but that'll be changing soon.
Okay, we have another question regarding the possibility to get information on the cancelled orders, all orders, or all orders back to the 1st January of 2016. We are not currently supporting that in the APIs, but you you should be able to do that via the interface on your orders history section. We are working hard to provide an improved reporting system. That is really important because part of the reporting system will be part also of the REST v2 APIs, so that you can extract data from the reporting system. You can have a statistical analysis, some basic statistical analysis. We are looking towards inserting some performance metrics. So we are working a lot to provide you more information. So I mean you cannot download your history via APIs now, but we are looking towards giving that kind of opportunity in the future.
Yeah, very cool. In fact, that's also one question I was curious about. Was your question was specifically regarding public data, right? All order book updates, all orders that have come in since a certain date. It doesn't really have to be the first. It could be any arbitrary date or any range of time. And then you also said canceled orders with the user ID. Well, I'm not sure about that one though, because it might have to be like a pseudonym perhaps, but is this more for analysis of how many people are canceling orders, etc.? That I wasn't really sure about on that question, what the canceled orders with trader ID was, what the goal was there. So I'm not sure if you can kind of update the question or explain what the purpose of the canceled order section was, but it appears that also another user has said that they do have some of that data. So you might be able to get it from them, and that's kind of what we also want to encourage is, anyone who's using the Bitfinex system, if we can kind of try to not repeat ourselves and not rewrite the same code that someone else has written. Ideally, it will result in that we can offer a new feature because we didn't have to work on that thing that someone else already did that works really well, and hopefully we eventually get a. Okay, yeah, I understand now. So you're trying to find the people with like the walls that kind of like might disappear when someone gets to them, etc., stuff like that. Well, I don't know if we would ever release like any information about the user because all the users are confidential, but maybe you could have like some kind of like pseudonym or something like that, some code for this same user did all these things. And I mean, we also do kind of internal checks to make sure that people aren't trying to do some kind of like spammy orders or anything like that. So yeah. 1 second. So I wanted to give everyone a moment to kind of vent any issues you may have or any complaints, any kind of like problems you've had using the system, anything that's just frustrating or annoying you. Now is the time where you can just kind of let us have it and let us know what you don't like. So there's a little back and forth going on about the user data. I think, yeah, that's interesting of an idea too. I haven't really thought about it a lot enough to kind of comment towards it, but if anyone wants to take an opportunity now to kind of discuss any complaints they have, you can feel free to go ahead and do so.
Also, please, if you have to point out any feature requests for the mobile application, please do so. We are open to that as well. It's a pretty new product. It's growing fast. We are working to make some good additions. We are planning to add the margin funding side. So anything that can come to your mind, please let us know.
Yes, exactly. That's really the whole purpose of this call, is just to kind of listen to you guys. I mean, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of people who have joined the talking section, but the people who are here have brought up some really interesting stuff. So we just want to listen to you guys and get any feedback you have. regarding even obviously constructive criticism, saying like, I don't know why you guys would do things this way. Like either there's a reason and we can explain it, or we can hopefully learn and make things better. So.
Well, I think that a paper trading platform will be welcome also with the API test platform. I think it could be cool.
Yes, exactly. That's actually something that I'm super passionate about. If you ask Paolo, I kind of bug him about it every day. And we're looking into the
Yeah,
best.
I can confirm.
Yeah, exactly. We've been looking into the way of how do we want to offer a testing platform for people, because that is something that's super necessary, in my opinion, a way to kind of test out your integration, maybe even to test out your trading strategy without actually having to put real money on the line. I, for one, really love like things like Travis, where I can have a project and I build it, and then I know that it didn't work because the Travis build system would then say, oh, like it failed the following tests. But unfortunately, I can't really, unless I want to unless I really want to put a real trading key for a real account with real money in it into Travis online and trust it with a third party, then it just doesn't really work as far as testing is concerned. But we have some interesting opinions about this, actually, because one thing that Paolo has seen as kind of an issue with having a completely separate fake Bitfinex, where it's basically like a testnet version, one of the issues he has with it is that it will tend to, over time, get out of sync with the real version, and it may not serve as the ideal testing platform, where it's not a really accurate test if it worked on the test environment, but then in production it failed because the test environment wasn't exactly in sync with the test environment. So one of the ways that me and Paolo have kind of come up with and kind of gone over to how we could potentially get around this is twofold. One would be creating a test pair, which would involve two fake test assets, which you could have as much as you want of, and you could then test, and there would be an order book for that, and all of that would be on the system. And then you, which certificate? Sorry.
The website certificate
The certificate for which?
for the docs.bitfinex.com since it's not working, the certificate.
Well, really weird. I'm on the site right now. Let me see.
Right. Showing an error for me.
Let me see. I'm gonna put it in.
Just to point it out, but I think it's not important now.
For what? For docs or for
Oh,
www?
Paolo, you entered in HTTPS for the docs. It came up with a certificate error. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I saw that.
There shouldn't be any detail on that. Well, I don't know if there is or not, but it's basically just a GitHub pages, so it's not really a part of the site. I think that the SSL cert might be covering it, but I have to check into that.
Yeah, let's look at that. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. But the thing, as far as testing is concerned, is I think that if we have a test pair on the production site, it might be more useful because you'd actually, there's some things, there's never going to be an exact replica of anything in reality, but let's say that we have a test site that, you know, has 75 milliseconds of latency, but our production site really only has 35. Now you try to test something, and I mean, there's also the question of hardware resources where, oh, I didn't see that error because I had enough time to respond, but on the production site, it came back too fast, and there was a timing issue. And timing issues are going to be really, really hard to pin down. So that's one of the reasons why I kind of like Paolo's kind of direction on creating a test pair inside of the production site that people could use for testing. And that way you'd be able to implement any of the order types. You'd just kind of opt into the test pair, and you could even test withdrawals, deposits, any of those kind of things. You'd be able to kind of test them out without having any real-world consequences, but you'd also be testing them against the production environment. So one of the other things that I was thinking of doing potentially as a way to kind of help people with their testing is just to create a default test user that you would then be able to just have that user's API keys, and you could plug those in wherever you wanted to, and that test user would be able to be kind of a generic user for anyone who wants to just do tests. So if I want to place an order, then I can place the order and the test using the test user's keys, and it would then give me back the test response saying yes, that's correct, or whatever, something like that. So these are kind of some of the what's the word? Kind of some of the implementations that we were looking at as possibilities to help with the testing. What would you think, Iago, for those ideas as opposed to having a standalone separate testnet version?
Well, full disclosure, I work for the Spanish Stock Exchange, so it's really close as your system. And that we have there is separate systems. We don't care about the latency on the test environment, and users can play with it. We don't care if they do bad things or they know that it's a payment platform that they can test in, and we don't worry a lot about it. So I will go for a separate environment.
Have you had any issues with someone? How do you keep those two in sync all the time? Like, do you just make sure that whenever you always just deploy to one and then deploy to the other, or?
Yes, exactly. We most of the times we deploy on the test first, and then if the things are working right, then we deploy to production.
Because that's kind of what I was talking about, though, is that let's say that I have a new feature that I'm going to roll out. So, for example, I want to roll out a new order type. I put it on testing first. So I could test it on testing and it would work, but then if I, that same day, tried to do it on production, it'd fail, and I'd be like, is my code wrong, or is my test wrong, or like I can't really know for sure if it's working or not because the two systems aren't identical. There's a new feature that's been added to test that doesn't exist in production, which means my test would pass on the test net but fail in production, which means it's not really useful as a test. That's what I was trying. That's the kind of thing that we would want to avoid. Is if the two systems aren't synced, then the test doesn't really help you because it won't actually work in production, even though your test says it works fine on the test net. So that was actually the issue that we wanted, or the pitfall that we're trying to avoid, and that's why I was thinking maybe the production system with a fake pair, like fake USD, fake BTC, where you could then play around all you want. It doesn't matter at all. There's no real assets involved, but you would be guaranteed to always have it working in production. From a testing perspective, it would be more. I think it'd be more useful. But what do you think, Paulo?
I like more the idea of having the test pairs just because what we are trying hard to do is to achieve is that we want to offer a way to test the your bots in a really real scenario. So also using production and production servers, we will get a latency that is close to the reality. Instead, if we are going to create a separate instance, for sure you will have twice or 3 times the latency that you have in production. So that for some users, for some traders, that may affect the way they are testing their bots. So I think that for our purposes, having the test pair would be the right solution.
I think that it might be possible, and we probably have to explore it more to do both, obviously. I just think that there would have to be some very clear warnings on the playground environment that, it's not necessarily going to be 100% in sync. It's not running on the same class of hardware. We actually responded to that also, Jack. We are definitely going to be adding a client ID field that's user customizable, so you can create your own client ID and then track it when it comes back via the WebSockets. That's actually, Paolo said, going to be implemented because it's necessary for us to do the input WebSocket API.
Oh, okay. That sounds good. That was basically my only complaint. The only reason I'm here, to be honest. Make
Yeah,
sure.
no, exactly. We definitely wanted to add that in. So, what do you think about the test net though? Because
So to be honest, like, uh, I thought about it. Like, if you guys had like a sandbox environment, like, in the Coinbase style or something like that. To be honest, it just wouldn't add very much value to me. Like, the real problems with those things are like, a lot of times the activity on them is kind of dead. And so like if you want to just test anything or stuff like that, like it's better to run a simulation rather than actually just query the endpoints and stuff like that. Like
yeah,
yeah, I mean like real-time order entry is by far the most important thing for me out of like this whole thing.
that's
So
what's very soon. That's actually the next thing that we're releasing um, after we do this hardware upgrade tomorrow. But that's actually what I was thinking too, because especially with what we're trying to do here is create the most high performance system that we can. And I mean, a lot of people are coming over from maybe a HFT background or some sort of where milliseconds matter and where you need to test against other volume, and it doesn't really make sense if it's just going to be like running on one single server where it's going to be slow and you won't know how your performance is doing because you have no way to test that against the real hardware.
yeah,
So I
I
think that
mean,
it might, for some users, be useful and necessary, or it might be useful if we create that, and if it
you
doesn't
know,
have a big, go ahead, sorry.
I was gonna say the only usefulness I see is mainly just testing that your platform code still interoperates correctly with the Bitfinex platform. Stuff like measuring latencies, or you want to submit orders or random other things, like using it as a test for the trading code. Like it doesn't seem that useful. Like it's only useful for like making sure that you didn't break
Yeah.
something in the platform code after an update or something like that.
With the idea of like an automated test suite or something like that, you could use
Uh,
like a
yeah.
fake pair, perhaps, that would be able to say, okay, yeah, I implemented the code correctly. I can place orders. Uh, I made some change to my bot. My test suite passed. I can still place orders. All the order types, all the cancels work, and I could get all the benefits of that without actually having to have the sandbox. The
Yeah.
sandbox is really useful for some things, I think, but not as useful, I think, as having it for the test pair on the production
Yeah,
hardware.
like you mentioned the test pair, and pretty much any use case that I can think of, I think would be covered by a test pair. Because then you
Yeah,
could just test making orders and random other stuff like that, and not have to price your orders at ridiculous amounts and hope that everything kind of goes right in order to actually test it. But
exactly.
yeah,
That's kind of what we were. That was kind of where we were leaning towards it. Um, So I think that maybe there are some users who would like to, for example, even if there was like a sandbox environment, who just want to play around with the UI and get comfortable with that. It might potentially be useful for them to be able to do so. Um, so we'll look into it, but it just to me, a lot of the value goes away because the two systems will probably not be in sync. Like, when do you release the feature live on production? When do you release it on testing? You want to use testing to test things, and then you are not in sync with production. Those are kind of the issues that we saw, and why we were kind of against the sandbox environment. Even though I do like the idea, and we thought that maybe the test pair would give us the same benefits without any of those pitfalls. So
yeah,
we
I like the test pair a lot. More than the sandbox environment, I think. Like, I mean, realistically, I just wouldn't use the sandbox,
yeah.
whereas I would use the test pair. So yeah,
So yeah, of course, different users will have different
yeah,
kind of use
of course.
cases. We'll see if there is a decent enough demand for some kind of like sandbox, and even if it's kind of small and underpowered, people could use it if that is actually necessary for their use cases.
Mhm.
Uh, we also discussed earlier the possibility of having a kind of default test user where when that user does things, you get back a response saying that, yes, this is correct, you formatted it correctly, you signed it correctly, all of this is working, and just using that user's kind of standard
Uh,
testing key and secret, and everyone has it, and it doesn't use real money. So you could put that into like a Travis CI bot, and then
yeah.
when you release a new build, it'll automatically test it against the default test user, and you'd be able to get kind of like the same kind of like, I got 100% code coverage, which is very hard to get unless you have some way of placing fake orders. I
Mhm.
can't go down that tree of the branching of the code because I don't want to spend real money every time I push out a build.
Yeah,
So
I actually like that idea a lot because that solves Yeah, the problem of actually committing your keys to version control and stuff
That's what I
is
don't
for the
want to do.
testers
I
here.
don't want to put my keys on Travis CI and have some bot that has keys to my real account and my money. Like, that's just crazy.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. So we want to kind of come up with solutions that allow people to test all parts of their code, but doesn't involve having to use real keys. And the two ways to do that is a default test account. And I think we can do both of those things, in fact. Have the default test account and also have a fake pair. So you can test your strategy using a fake pair. And also you can just put in some fake keys that'll always give you back realistic results. So that's kind of what we were kind of thinking.
Yeah, I think it sounds pretty good.
Any complaints from anybody? Still haven't got. Someone had mentioned actually that perhaps we could have a better documentation. I totally agree. I mean, I did the documentation, but I think it could definitely be better. So we kind of are hoping that if people spot anything, in fact, some people have started doing that. Some people have started submitting saying like, hey, you put a spelling mistake here, and the docs are open source as well, so you can feel free to suggest any changes on those docs that make them more understandable, easier to read, give better examples. We still have to go through and kind of make sure that they're all in sync. That's actually one of the reasons why we were discussing using Swagger for the REST v2 API, because the documentation would be automatically generated. And actually, that was one of the things that Edan had made for us in a way. Was that's the GitHub for the docs page. So it's using something called Slate to generate it. But you can edit the source and create a pull request, and we'll review it. I mean, as long as you don't just write Baba Booey or something like that. Probably if it makes sense, we'll just merge your pull request, and you can change the docs to be better. So obviously, we also are going to be improving the docs and making them more understandable and intuitive. But at the same time, if you don't want to wait, you can always submit a pull request, and if you find something that we didn't find, you can also, of course, if you don't want to actually submit a pull request, just create an issue on the docs, and then we'll look at that issue and we'll resolve it, and we'll make the changes. But either way is fine, but we want to really, as much as we can, as much as it makes sense, open up things open source as much as possible and kind of have community feedback. You can create issues, you can create pull requests, you can really make the code your own. All the client libraries that we have, like the SDKs or whatever, all those are open source on GitHub, and the documentation as well is open source. So.
Also, we have a couple of other questions. So we talked about earlier about the possibility to use Swagger, and we are looking into that. So yeah, we are trying to think to a solution that we can use from now and in the future to provide you a better way to follow our API changes. So that is part of the internal discussion in these days, and we will come up with a solution. Maybe we will ask your opinion on that. Regarding the instead the okay. I saw. Okay, is there any documentation on how should I calculate the fees when I'm making an order with all my USD? I don't think we had that, but if you write to the support, you should have the answer to that question.
This is also kind of related to what we were talking about earlier, where if I have $100 and I want to buy $100 worth of Bitcoins, then I need to do some pretty complex calculations because the price is moving, and I'm saying, okay, well, if the price is right now $425.77, then I'm going to pay, okay, what's my fee again? Okay, it's going to be 0.1 if I'm a maker, but 0.2 if I'm a taker, or reverse that. 0.2 if I'm a taker, 0.1 if I'm a maker. Okay, so then it's going to be this much, which means I need to decrease my amount by this much. So it kind of makes this like, I mean, it's not obviously an impossible question to solve, and also it depends on how much precision you really need. But I really think that the easiest way to do this would be, and we've already discussed and wanted to implement that, is to have an all-in order saying I want $100 worth of Bitcoins, which means that I have $100 in my account, use all of it to just buy Bitcoins, and whatever the fees are, then obviously you're going to take that out before the buying happens, so I don't have to deal with all those kind of calculations. And I think that makes a lot of sense. As far as can you calculate it, you can calculate it because there's an API endpoint that will give you back what your fees are per pair, etc., and any information about you specifically as an account. And then obviously you can use that value combined with, if you're using a limit order, it's a lot easier to calculate, well, the fees on that order, if I buy one Bitcoin at this specific price, would be X, and now I need to basically decrease my order size by the US dollar equivalent of X. So not obviously very, doesn't flow very well, but it's possible. I think that, as you had pointed out, hold on a second, I'm just going to select this, that yes, it would make sense to just have an all-in order where I don't need to do all those calculations on the back end and I just leave it up to you guys. So I think that kind of...
Yeah, we have marked that. We will going to add that also to the APIs.
Yep. Okay, so the next one is really interesting, and this is exactly the reason why I wanted to go to Swagger, is because we'd have automatic testing of all the API endpoints with all the official clients, and basically all the documentation on all the clients, all the tests on all the clients, and all the clients themselves would all be updated whenever the API is updated. So I think that would kind of result in a lot less, what's the word, maintenance work, as far as like, okay, we just made a change that means that the second field now is the third field. Okay, let's go through our 20 different libraries and change all the code. It's so much easier just to be able to say, okay, the schema of the API has changed, generate the clients, test all the clients, generate the docs for those clients, and we're done. So I was actually saying earlier that Idan actually provided some really good documentation for the Bitfinex Node client library. So that actually is auto-generated using API docs, I believe. JS docs, I think it's called, actually. Is that right, Idan? I'm not sure if he's still here, but yes, that is the reason why I was kind of looking at Swagger, is to get automatic testing for all endpoints and all client libraries, as well as documentation that's always in sync, to answer Dragostini's question. We've looked into this. I think we actually, did we not already include this, Paolo? Would you consider including a trade side? Was it a buy or sell in WebSocket API on trades channel? I know that, I don't know, have we included this, Paolo? I know that we have the negative for sells and positive for buys. That's on the order book side. So I don't know.
Yeah, but also on the trade side. And for the moment, we will probably stick with this, but we are thinking in the future to add a more detailed and let's say verbose WebSocket feed with, but it's not ready yet. It's only in our wish list.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So yeah, but currently, just to clarify again, do you have like some kind of a indication if it was someone hitting the best bid or best ask, like whether it was a sell or a buy?
Yeah, it should be, the amount should be positive or negative.
That's what I was thinking, is that if it's a negative amount on the trades feed, that means that it was someone selling, and if it was a positive amount on the trades feed, that means it was someone buying. But we wouldn't actually add a field that included the string buy or sell, because we want to try to make it as compact and compressed as possible for efficiency purposes. And ideally, if we were going to have some kind of buy or sell thing, we'd add it to a client library so that it would parse the trade coming in and create a human-readable JSON saying side, buy or sell, while the actual data that we transmit is just a positive or negative number, resulting in a much smaller message, although it includes all the information. So,
Actually, I have a question about this. Including information, though, unless I'm mistaken, when you get those order change events on the WebSocket feed. Um, is it possible to tell whether your order got executed solely from those messages, or like for instance, if you send a cancel to the exchange or something like that, and then you get like order change events that are unrelated to the cancel, like it gets executed, for instance. Is it possible to tell that those are executions, or it's just that your order is getting changed?
It depends, because I don't think that you can actually. So there's a couple different message types. There's position, or well, it depends. Okay, if it's an order, then you would have which would kind of relate to the exchange market. You'd have an order update, order execution, I believe, and order new. Those are the three types of messages you can get in regards to an order. So.
Oh, there is an order execute message. I didn't see it.
Yes. But you would.
Yeah, in the private channel, yes, there is TE message that is the trade execution, and there is the order update with the status updated that contains the execution word.
But it doesn't. Is there a flag on the order update though that mentions that it's an execute, or do you have to wait for the second message?
It's not a flag on that. It is in the WebSocket channel, on the authenticated channels. It would tell you. It would update the order.
You should have the status, that is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sixth field, that is order status, and should contain the word executed.
Okay. That's fine then.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay.
Perfect, yeah. So, as I was saying, for Domagoj Klepak, and also, sorry if I don't pronounce people's names correctly. I can only go by what I can read, so a little difficult. But yeah, you can currently tell whether it's a buy or sell in the trades channel by looking at whether it's a positive or negative number, but we would not actually include a new field that has a string in it, but you do have that information available to finish up that last question there. Thorvald, question regarding open source libraries. Yes, we do plan to offer more, and ideally, if we use Swagger, yes. So ideally, then we could generate, I believe that there's like 20 plus different languages that you can generate client libraries in for a Swagger spec. Regardless of whether we decide to go with Swagger or one of the other options or anything else, yes, we do have plans to release more libraries. C#, I believe, is one of the ones that is kind of close to the top of the list. I think that C# was one of the ones that we wanted to do. Palo also really wants to make one for MATLAB, I believe. And we also, I think, wanted to do Python. I think those are kind of like the top three that we're looking into having open source libraries for. And again, of course, they're open source, so if anyone wants to kind of, if anyone has any of those kind of like a C# library that would serve as like a good base for an official client library, feel free to get in touch with us. We'll create it. We can, even if it's a work in progress, it's not a problem. We can at least start hopefully attracting people who are also interested in, like, I mean, you have no, like, I've had to do so much debugging with people who are trying to write stuff in Perl or something like that, and I'm like, okay, I don't know how Perl does that. So if you work with me, then yeah, we can implement any language that the community wants to see, provided, of course, that's kind of like a proviso that the community also already has something to go with that and wants to make it open source. So yeah, I think that's done. We definitely do plan on having other libraries. Dragostini said a test user with fake orders that fake match would solve all my testing needs. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that one. More documentation for the API and SDKs. Yes, I think that is something that we need to work on. And I kind of addressed that with hopefully, again, with some kind of auto-generating docs that can ideally keep them in sync, because let me see, I'm going to switch over to the chat room. Yeah, I think as Yago had said, it's interesting because I personally think that what you should do is make the data on the wire as compressed and as efficient as possible, and then expand it on the client. Like, you should send all the information. I just don't think it should be human readable on the wire. I think that you should basically, and this is what I was kind of looking into doing with the Node library, is just creating, especially with, I'm a huge fan of ECMA 2015, so I've been playing around with a lot of that stuff, and kind of what I was looking to do, and actually, Yago, you might be the perfect person to talk about with this, would be that I was thinking that instead of accepting a string of arguments, I think it would be much preferable to accept a object, or to, if necessary, do either or. Although I kind of prefer the object because it's kind of just in general somewhat annoying to have to be like, okay, wait, now when I like to use the terminal, and I just like to open up a node instance and play around with it to see if it's working, and it just gets really to be a hassle when you have to like keep having all these long number of fields. When if you have an object, I think it's a lot easier to work with. So I was thinking of maybe in the node library to start, it would be nice if we had like kind of official classes for order, which has all the things you need to submit for an order, with maybe some sensible defaults in there. Like, for example, the exchange field will always be Bitfinex now because we don't actually do the order routing at this point. And then it would make it, hopefully, I believe, a lot easier for a user just to create a new instance of the order class and just pop that into the send order function and have everything they need already there. Versus right now where you have to individually kind of give a long array, and it also kind of gets annoying with the last thing needs to be a callback, but not all fields are necessary. So that's one of the things that I kind of wanted to perhaps look into changing. And that kind of also speaks to the question, which was it should be easy to use and human readable. And I think that you can still have a highly efficient protocol underneath, and the client library receives this compressed, even if it was like, for example, a binary blob, and it expands it out into a human readable, price, this, and has all the strings and everything. And then you don't have to take up the bandwidth to send those strings when the strings will never change. So that's kind of my take on it.
Okay, was that?
So did we have any new questions? No questions for now. That's actually an interesting question, Jack, because yeah, I've actually used to work with like NASDAQ itch or pitch or any of the other kind of clones of itch. This is something that was interesting because I don't know if, Paolo, do you want to talk a little bit about fix implementations and whether, I'm not sure if there was still a lot of interest in that from the community. I think that most people are like, yeah, I don't really need it, but I was kind of looking at something like that, like a binary protocol that might be able to be used.
Just to clarify, did you say fix or itch? Because like the fix protocol stuff is like that super bloated text protocol. It's kind of weird, but the itch stuff for like NASDAQ, for instance, is like pretty condensed in terms of like kind of what it provides and even how to interpret it too.
Yeah. Right. I don't know if at this point it would make any sense to switch, but as Paolo said, we might offer different sort of mediums via which you could access it. So, in fact, I think it would be interesting to have like a translated, like, because what I think is that at the end of the day, we're talking about data, right? And if I wanted to receive data in a certain format, like for example, let's say that I just don't like JSON and I want XML, it's relatively trivial to turn your JSON object into an XML object and offer an XML stream for people if it was ever necessary. I personally hate XML, but as an example, one of the things, and I think it would be actually a very potentially useful thing, I don't think you can actually use NASDAQ itch because I think it's proprietary. I think you have to just use like a clone of it, like pitch, I think, right? Isn't it open source?
I think pitch and itch are the same, right? NASDAQ.
Pitch is like the open source copy of pitch because you can't use it, as far as I remember, which is why pitch exists, I think, because you're not allowed to use NASDAQ's thing. So Yeah, basically some kind of binary format like that. Actually, one of the things that, so as I said before, I'm a huge fan of JavaScript. I love JavaScript and all things JavaScript. And my favorite platform in JavaScript is Meteor. And Meteor is a collection of different tools that provide a really easy web development experience. One of those tools is something called DDP, which is basically just a protocol standard for a REST implementation over WebSockets. And there's some others, I think, that other people have created. I can't remember what it's called, but
Yeah,
basically,
I was gonna say my only big concern about stuff like this, especially like what you just mentioned, a REST implementation over WebSockets and stuff. Like while there might be libraries pre-built for this and like JavaScript and stuff, if anyone is using like a different language that just doesn't happen to have a library, the protocol like might be too tedious to implement by comparison. Like I'm really a big fan of like the current route even where the WebSocket and some medium over that basically, so that people if they want to use it
what I was saying is that those current things not going to go away. It's going to be there and available the way it is now for anyone who wants to use it. But if we could add potentially another layer on top of it for someone who wants to speak that particular dialect, and then it's like, well, yeah, I'm just more comfortable using pitch. Well, it would be translating the API as it currently is into pitch, and then sending you that, and you'd connect over that specific, port probably. It'd probably be like 3,000s for normal, 4,000s for pitch, 5,000s for DDP. The thing about DDP though is that it's language agnostic actually. So the beauty of it though is that what I was thinking is so Meteor basically uses this concept whereby it has a cached instance of the Mongo database in the browser, right? And then it's just going to subscribe to messages and then have them be updated as messages come in. So if a user's deleted, it gets deleted on the client by receiving the remove this thing from the collection. So what I was thinking of is, as a potential community project even, would be to have an implementation of DDP that basically listens to the API, translates it into a DDP message, so that, and this could also be translated into other things, but basically it's kind of like an interpreter, so that it takes in the standard API and spits out a different format that people are willing to or seeking to connect to. And specifically, that's why I was bringing up the DDP, because it's similar to kind of how I would envision an implementation of some sort of binary protocol like that. In that everyone can always just go to the underlying WebSockets, but if they want to build something on top of those WebSockets that makes it easier for groups of people who are using a specific technology to connect, then that would be something worthwhile. I don't want to get too off topic on that. So. What do you think, Paolo, actually? I haven't actually talked to you about any of the binary protocols yet, but...
If we are planning to doing HFT, we should at first start think to provide a way for users to find the best location for their servers. That is the first thing. Otherwise, everything else is doesn't make too much sense to me. I mean, because you need to have a really close location to our servers. Otherwise, it would be not interesting. And aside that, I think that there are a couple of implementation of other protocols that we may want to implement in the future. But I worked a lot with Fix, and I'm not a pretty big fan of Fix because it's really bold and really slow. And so aside of the standard WebSockets, I'd like to offer something like Page for sure. And I would say something, for example, more a bit outstanding, but I think working with a couple other companies, I found that really useful. Some endpoint based on Node.js on CRMQ that is pretty good way to compress messages in a binary stream, and it's really fast as a publish subscribe channel. So we have a couple other ideas here, but in this moment, these are low priority. We are mainly thinking to improve what we have now with WebSockets and REST v2, and then as soon as these two projects are finished and they are looking good for you, we will move to look to new protocols that you may find interesting. So we are still open to the suggestions on that side.
Yep. Okay, so looks like we've gone through all the questions now, and I have a couple people talking in chat. Oh, well, right now, actually, we've always been very against offering colo because we think it gives some people an advantage. So we've always declined any requests up to this point. I don't see that changing soon, but I don't know. So that's why I think he was saying that it doesn't really make so much sense in some scenarios because, like, you have this tiny amount of space saved over here while you still have the massive kind of overhead of just having to go through the internet. So it doesn't really save very much.
You know that on our website, you know that our servers are in Italy, so that's better than have the servers in USA at least.
Yeah, exactly. Some people have already done that, kind of gotten the servers as close, same country, you know. But yeah, like we don't want to be, especially in the Bitcoin world, kind of like a new opportunity, and we don't want to kind of we never want to just give someone like, hey, you get early access to this market data. Obviously, we can't control when people get data based on where they are in the world, but we don't want to ever have some kind of like what's it called, Flash Boys type book written about us. So that's kind of the and I mean, I think that all of us come from, or at least the people who are on our side at Bitfinex, most of us come from like a Wall Street kind of background or working with high-frequency trading systems, or so we have some kind of familiarity with that. So we try to take the good and what makes sense about it, and what's logical that obviously you'd want to do it that way. They've already kind of kicked the tires and tried a bunch of different things, and this is what worked, but we don't want to kind of replicate any problems that Wall Street's had in the past, so, or Chicago in that, for that matter. But so anyways, looks like we've gone through all the questions. I just want to open up the floor to anyone else who would like to discuss anything else to make sure that we kind of get as much out of this as we can. So if anyone else wants to kind of bring up anything that we haven't discussed yet, have any kind of concerns or complaints, suggestions, feature requests, now's the time, and go for it. And if not, then I just want to say it's been a pleasure chatting with everyone here, and I'm really glad that this is the first of these kind of hangouts that we're going to do. I'm sure it's not going to be the last one, and I'm hoping that the next one will be not too long in the future, and maybe we can revisit some of the kind of community project stuff that we were talking about specifically, and also you guys can keep us accountable on some of the stuff that we are telling you about, some of the stuff you requested, and say, hey, I'm still waiting on that thing that you guys said that you were going to do. So I don't know, what do you think, Paolo? Like maybe like once a month or once every 2 months we could have one of these?
Yeah, let's go with that. I really like to stay close to the community and have. I mean, we got really cool suggestions this night, so I'm really a fan of that.
I'm really happy about there's a lot of things that I was really happy that users brought up because it slipped my mind. I didn't add it to anything on the docs that what we were going to discuss, but it was totally something that when they brought it up, I was like, oh yeah, we definitely should talk about that. So I think it was really good. I'm hoping that it becomes more. I hope more people are able to take advantage of it. I know that we're targeting a pool of okay, all the developers who are involved in Bitcoin who use Bitfinex. It's going to be a small pool of people compared to the total developers in the world. But I just hope that it was offered something of value to people who did attend, and that you enjoyed it or got something out of it. So if there's nothing else, I guess we can wrap this up. And I believe, I don't know how Hangouts works 100%. It's way more confusing than it used to be. But I think that there will be this will be available to listen to later if people want to revisit. I don't know how that works, but
So thank you very much, guys, and see you next time. Hopefully, really soon.
yes, definitely. So we'll talk to you guys next time, and hope to see some cool community projects. Have a good one.